By the time the door locked behind her, everyone in the room already knew somebody was about to disappear. Not tonight, not loudly, but permanently. I was sitting back where the light don't reach, listening to men pretend they weren't nervous. Cards on the table, coffee untouched. Too many eyes checking the door. That's how you know the balance is off. When grown men with guns start counting footsteps. In Harlem, there were rules you could write down and rules you learned by surviving. The written ones kept business moving. The other kind kept children breathing. Confuse the two and you didn't last long. People downtown liked to call me a criminal. That was convenient for them. Labels saved time. But up here, labels didn't mean much. Results did. Order did. And order is expensive. That night, Order walked in wearing a summer coat and shaking hands. She didn't ask permission. Didn't scan the room. Just walked straight through smoke and danger like she'd already decided nothing in here could scare her more than what already had. That's when the room went quiet, not the polite kind. The kind that means everybody's listening because somebody's life just got weighed. I didn't ask her name. Names waste time when the truth is written on someone's face. Her eyes were swollen, not from crying. From not sleeping. Her hands shook, but her spine didn't. That told me everything I needed. I tapped the empty chair. She sat. And when she spoke, nobody interrupted. Not because they were kind. Because they were smart enough to know when the air turns heavy, you don't move unless told. There'd been whispers all week. Side glances. Half sentences cut short when cops passed by. A man nobody recognized drifting too close to playgrounds, lingering too long near corner stores, smiling when he shouldn't. Harlem notices things like that. Then a little girl didn't come home on time. 6 hours is a lifetime when the sun goes down and your child isn't in your arms. 6 hours turns faith into rage, turns prayers into plans. When they found her, she wasn't bleeding. But she wasn't whole either, and the police. They did what they always do when the problem don't live in their neighborhood. They wrote it down, filed it away, drove off. That's when her mother came to see me. When she finished talking, nobody breathed. I could feel the room waiting to see which way the scale tipped. Mercy or math. I took out a cigarette. Let it sit there between my fingers, not for the smoke, for the sound. Tap, tap, tap. Like a clock reminding someone out there they were running out of road. Go home, I told her. Sit with your baby, lock the door. She looked at me like she didn't believe doors mattered anymore. They don't, I said, but tonight they will. She left without thanking me. That's how I knew she trusted me. The moment the door closed, the room changed shape. Sympathy burned off fast. What was left was work. I turned to my right, gave a description, not loud, didn't need to be. Harlem hears everything when it wants to. Gray car, man alone, watching where he didn't belong. Somebody asked what happens when we find him. I looked up then. A bullet's too quick, I said. I want him breathing. I want him understanding. Nobody argued. Within the hour, the streets woke up. Not with noise, with attention. Shoeshine boys remembered license plates. Bartenders noticed who ordered water and didn't drink it. Women at windows started seeing too much. That man thought he was invisible. What he didn't know was that he'd already stepped into something alive, and it was starting to tighten. By morning, the heat broke, but the tension didn't. Rain came down hard, like the city was trying to wash itself clean. Streets turned slick. Alleys went dark and shiny. That kind of weather makes people sloppy, makes predators impatient. That's why I wasn't worried. I stayed inside, played a quiet game by myself. Let the pieces sit where they were. Monsters don't run when they think nobody's watching. They get comfortable, they circle back. They convince themselves they're smarter than the street. Meanwhile, Harlem was watching everything. The man disappeared for 2 days. No gray car, no lingering smiles, no movement near the playgrounds. Some of my people started wondering if he caught wind and slipped out to Queens or Jersey. I didn't correct them. Fear makes people rush, and rushing gets children hurt. The third night, the phone rang, not loud. Not frantic, just certain. A runner on 145th, voice low, said there was a car tucked into an alley behind an old warehouse, said it hadn't moved in hours, plates caked with mud, engine cold, driver still inside, watching, not the street, not the doors, the swings. That's when the game ended. I stood up. Buttoned my jacket, checked myself in the mirror. Same man as always, calm face, clean lines, no sign of what was coming. Fear works better when it doesn't announce itself. We moved without lights, 2 cars, no sirens, no rush. Rain covered the sound. The city made space for us like it always does when it knows better. We parked a block away and walked the rest. I didn't carry a gun, never needed to. Will is heavier than steel if you know how to use it. My men spread out, quiet and patient, like this wasn't their first time ending something ugly. The gray sedan sat there breathing slow, fogging the windows. He never heard us. Johnny tapped the glass once. Not hard, just enough. The man inside jumped like his soul tried to escape first. Hands went for the ignition. Too late. Door opened. Arms grabbed him. He hit the pavement hard, mud filling his mouth, lies already forming on his tongue. He screamed for the police. That's when I stepped into the light. He saw the shoes first, then the suit, then my face, and just like that he stopped screaming. Some men recognize the end when it looks them in the eye. I didn't raise my voice, didn't touch him, just asked him to show me his left hand. He hesitated. That was his last mistake. Mud wiped away, scar underneath, white and jagged. Same mark the little girl remembered. I straightened up. Put him in the trunk, I said. The lid slammed shut, cutting off, begging mid-word. Rain swallowed the sound like it never happened. As we pulled away, I looked back at the empty playground. Swings rocking in the wind. No children, no laughter, just waiting. The hunt was over, but judgment, that part was just getting started. The basement didn't welcome you, it swallowed you. Cold air. Old stone, the kind of silence that presses on your chest until your thoughts get loud. That's why I liked it. Truth doesn't whisper down there, it leaks. They had him tied to the chair when I arrived. Coat gone, pride gone, still breathing. Barely. Men like that always think bargaining is a skill. They don't understand timing. By the time you're tied up, the deal is already closed. I took off my jacket, rolled my sleeves. Not because I planned to work hard, because details matter. People remember them. He was talking when I stepped into the light. Promises, money, names, anywhere but here. My men didn't respond. They never do. Silence teaches faster. I poured him water, held it to his mouth. Let him drink. That confused him. Confusion is useful. He thanked me, called me sir. Offered numbers that meant nothing. Said words like accident and misunderstanding. I let him talk. People reveal their real selves when they think language can save them. When he ran out of breath, I leaned in. Asked him what a child's sleep costs. Asked him how many dollars buy back a scream you can't forget. He didn't have an answer, just noise. I stood up, walked to the wall. Let him hear the scrape before he saw what I picked up. Heavy, honest, built to break things that don't bend. That's when the room shifted. Fear isn't loud at first. It tightens. You see it in the eyes. The body already knows before the mind catches up. I told him my rule, not dramatic, not angry, just simple. Hurt the future, you lose your place in the present. He begged then. Real begging, promised he'd disappear. I believed him, that didn't change anything. When it was over, he didn't scream anymore, just made sounds that didn't belong to words. I told my men to wake him. Some lessons need witnesses. I leaned close, told him he was going to live. Told him he was going to tell this story every time someone asked why he walked wrong. Told him names matter, mine especially. They took him out after that, alive, broken, carrying a message heavier than his body. I stayed behind for a moment, watched the light bulb sway, thought about how thin the line is between order and chaos. How often someone has to stand in the middle and decide. Upstairs, the city kept breathing. But somewhere out there, someone else was listening. Someone who didn't like the idea of me deciding where lines get drawn, and I could feel it. The game wasn't finished. By morning, the story was already moving faster than the truth. Not in papers, not on radios, on stoops, in barbershops, in looks that linger a second too long. Harlem didn't need details, it understood outcomes. Kids came back outside. Hydrants opened. Mothers leaned out windows again. That's how you measure success up here. Not applause, breathing. But peace never arrives alone. It brings jealousy with it. By noon, I started hearing the other whispers. Not about the man we caught, about me, about lines being crossed. About how some people didn't like one man deciding what justice looked like without asking permission. That's when you know you did something right. Power doesn't get challenged when it's weak. It gets challenged when it's clear. A runner came in around dusk, didn't sit, didn't smile, said there were meetings happening I wasn't invited to, said a few out-of-town interests were asking questions, the wrong kind. The kind that start with "who does he think he is" and end with blood on sidewalks. I nodded. Told him to eat something. Fear makes men thin. Later that night I sat by the window and listened to Harlem settle, laughter drifting up, music off-key, life returning to places it had abandoned for a week. That's when the phone rang again. Different tone this time, no relief in the voice. No certainty. They found the gray car burned out across the river. Clean job, no plates, no fingerprints. Someone didn't want reminders lying around. That wasn't the predator covering tracks. That was someone cleaning up after him. I set the receiver down slow, because that meant the man I broke wasn't alone, and the people who sent him weren't scared of warnings. They were testing borders. I adjusted my cuffs, finished my coffee. Outside, Harlem slept easy. Inside, I started planning for the next move. Because when someone challenges your right to protect the future, they're really asking how far you're willing to go to keep it. The mother came back a week later, didn't rush, didn't cry, held her daughter's hand like it was something solid, something finally safe again. That's how I knew the city had done its job. She didn't approach the table, just stood by the door until I noticed. Respect works both ways. I folded my paper. The girl looked at me, studied me. Children always do. They see through stories. She raised her hand and waved, small, careful. I nodded back. Once, that was enough. They left together, sunlight waiting for them outside. I watched until the door closed. Then I went back to reading like nothing important had happened. That's the trick. Never look like the moment mattered. I told Johnny to handle the rent. Quietly, said to make it look like a mistake. Protection works best when it doesn't ask for thanks. But the street always keeps score. What I did didn't scare the wolves the way people think. It educated them. Fear fades. Understanding lasts. Still, not everyone appreciated the lesson. That night word came in from downtown, politicians whispering, syndicate men asking whether Harlem was still open territory, whether rules applied evenly or only when it suited me. Questions like that don't stay questions for long. They turn into tests. I stood by the window again, watched shadows move where they didn't used to, new faces, patient ones, measuring distance, counting exits. Somebody was thinking about making a statement, and statements never come alone. I straightened my tie, let the city breathe a little longer, because the next time someone tried to redraw the lines, they weren't going to do it quietly, and I was ready to answer. They didn't come for me loud. That's how I knew they were serious. No drive-bys, no threats sent through sloppy mouths, just silence where there used to be rhythm. A bartender on Lenox closed early for no reason. A runner missed his route. A face I didn't recognize stood too long under a streetlight pretending to wait for nobody. That's pressure. The kind you don't feel on your chest. You feel it in the math. Someone was mapping Harlem like it was up for auction, testing how far my reach really went, seeing if the rules still held when nobody was watching the children. I let it play. Power that reacts too fast tells on itself. 2 nights later, one of my trucks didn't come back. Legit load, clean books, vanished between here and the river. No witnesses, no calls, just absence. That wasn't business. That was a message written in white space. I sat with it. Let the anger pass. Anger makes noise. I needed quiet. I needed to see who benefited from the hole left behind. By morning, the answer surfaced. An outfit from downtown. Well-funded, poorly informed. They thought what I did in the basement made me emotional. Thought I acted from sentiment instead of structure. That's the mistake outsiders always make. They confuse protection with weakness. I called Johnny in. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't give a speech. Just asked one question. Who's been smiling lately that shouldn't be? He didn't answer right away, which told me everything. There was a man, mid-level, friendly, too friendly. Been eating well while everyone else tightened belts, passing messages he claimed were harmless. Invitations disguised as favors. A hinge. I nodded. Told Johnny to do nothing. Yet, because if someone is going to betray you, you don't stop them mid-step. You let them walk all the way into the room where the door locks from the outside. That night I walked Harlem longer than usual, let people see me, let them relax, let whoever was watching think I didn't notice the shift, but I did. And somewhere nearby, someone was getting very confident. Confidence is loud even when it thinks it's quiet, and it was about to say too much. Confidence got him killed faster than loyalty ever could. He asked for the meeting himself, neutral ground, late hour, said he had something worth everybody's time. That's always how it starts. Men never think they sound greedy when they're already tasting what isn't theirs. I agreed. Didn't bring an entourage. Didn't change my routine. Power doesn't show up heavy unless it's insecure. I wanted him calm. I wanted him talking. The place was quiet, too quiet, chairs stacked, lights low, a room that had heard a lot of promises and kept none of them. He was already there when I arrived, sweating through confidence he couldn't quite hold in place. He smiled, sat forward, started explaining things I hadn't asked about. How Harlem could be expanded. How certain people downtown had resources. How rules didn't have to be so rigid if everyone benefited. That's when I knew he wasn't selling me a deal. He was selling me out. I let him finish. Let the silence stretch until he tried to fill it with laughter. Men do that when they feel the ground shifting. I asked him one question. Did they tell you what happens after? He blinked. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, didn't touch him, didn't threaten him, just walked past and stopped at the door. That truck, I said, not turning around. That was your idea. He started talking fast then. Names, numbers, apologies, promises to fix it. I opened the door. Behind it, Johnny was waiting. The man's voice broke when he saw him. Not fear yet, understanding. The kind that comes right before fear erases everything else. I stepped out into the night and closed the door behind me. I didn't listen. I didn't need to, because the real danger wasn't the man in that room. It was the people who thought sending him was enough. And somewhere downtown, someone was about to realize they'd just declared a war they didn't understand. That's when the city gets expensive. The man disappeared clean, too clean, no body turning up, no rumor drifting back too fast, no drunk mouths bragging about what they'd seen. That told me the people downtown were disciplined, careful, the kind who don't panic when a pawn goes missing. They were waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. Instead, I tightened Harlem without touching it. Less noise, fewer faces. Routes changed without explanation. Money slowed just enough to make people pay attention. When you control the rhythm, silence becomes a weapon. That's when the invitation came. Not a threat, not a demand, an offer, a neutral sit-down, out-of-town table, big names, bigger smiles. The kind of meeting where everyone pretends the knives are decorative. They wanted to clarify boundaries. Boundaries only get clarified when someone plans on crossing them. I accepted, because refusing tells them you're afraid. And showing up tells them you're confident, but walking in alone, that tells them you already know how it ends. The night before the meeting, I stood by the window again. Same street, same sounds, kids laughing late, a mother calling someone home. Life continuing like it trusted me to keep my word. That's the weight nobody sees. I adjusted my cuffs and thought about the man in the basement. About the mother. About the gray car burning across the river. About how every move creates an echo. Downtown thought this was about territory. They were wrong. This was about who gets to decide what kind of city we live in when nobody's looking. And tomorrow, I was walking into a room full of men who believed power comes from numbers. I was going to remind them. Power comes from consequences. The room was already full when I arrived. That was deliberate, long table, too many chairs, too many smiles stretched just a little too thin. Men who shook hands like they were measuring bone density. Men who believed numbers protected them. Men who never had to look a mother in the eye and decide what mattered more, peace or permission. I took my seat without greeting anyone. Let them talk first. They spoke about logistics, percentages, expansion, mutual respect. That word gets used a lot by people who don't practice it. They mentioned the truck like it was an accident. Mentioned the missing man like he'd wandered off on his own. Nobody said Harlem out loud. They didn't have to. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice, didn't lean forward, just asked a simple question that landed heavier than anything they'd rehearsed. Which one of you is responsible for children not coming home? The room froze, not silence, calculation. Men checking each other's faces, deciding whether this was theater or warning. One of them smiled, wrong move, said nobody here dealt in that kind of mess. Said maybe I was getting emotional, said business can't be run on feelings. I nodded. Then I told them something they didn't know, told them about the burned car, told them about the runner they lost last winter and never figured out why. Told them which phones were already compromised and which men at the table had been skimmed from without realizing it. That's when chairs shifted. That's when breathing changed. I wasn't threatening them. I was educating them. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Harlem isn't for sale, I said, and it's not neutral ground, it's protected ground. Someone reached for a glass, another for a cigarette. Nobody reached for a weapon, not yet. As I walked toward the door, I felt it. That shift. The moment when men stop pretending and start deciding. I didn't turn around, because whatever decision they made next was going to cost them something they hadn't budgeted for, and the city was listening. I didn't make it halfway down the block before I knew they'd chosen wrong. The air felt different, too still. Cars idling where they shouldn't, footsteps out of rhythm with the street. Harlem talks when it's nervous. That night it went quiet again. Somebody wanted to answer power with speed. That's always a mistake. A shot cracked 3 streets over, not aimed at me. A message shot, loud enough to be heard, far enough to pretend it was random. That told me everything I needed to know about who I was dealing with. They weren't disciplined anymore. They were emotional. By dawn, one of my safe houses was burned down. Empty, clean, another message. No bodies, no collateral. They wanted me irritated, not grieving. I stayed calm. I went for a walk, not to inspect damage, to listen, to see who avoided my eyes and who didn't. Fear leaves fingerprints on faces. Loyalty does too. By the time I finished the block, I had a list. That afternoon, Johnny brought me news. One of the downtown men from the table had pulled his family out of the city overnight, packed fast, left money behind. Guilt does that, so does foreknowledge. I told Johnny to let it happen, said to keep eyes on the others. Pressure reveals fractures faster than violence ever will. That night I sat alone and laid the board out in my head. Who moves next? Who thinks they're safe? Who thinks I won't go where I need to go? They burned a building. I was about to burn an idea, and when ideas catch fire, they spread where you can't see them coming. Somewhere downtown, a man was sleeping easy, convinced this was still business. By morning, he was going to learn the difference. Morning didn't bring clarity, it brought confirmation. One of their accountants went missing before sunrise. No drama, no noise, just absence. A man who loved numbers suddenly removed from the equation. That's when panic started whispering through the wrong channels. Phones lit up, meetings canceled, runners stalled, money hesitated. I didn't claim it, didn't need to. When power is real, it doesn't sign its work. By noon, a message reached me through a mouth that didn't want to be carrying it. They wanted another sit-down, smaller table, fewer smiles, same tone, still pretending they weren't already losing ground. I agreed again, because fear sharpens honesty. This time the room smelled like sweat and regret. They spoke less, listened more. One man couldn't stop watching the door. Another kept touching his ring like it might protect him. They asked what I wanted. That question always comes too late. I told them I wanted one thing: acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that Harlem wasn't a market, it was a responsibility. That certain lines don't move just because money asks them to. That if they ever sent another predator north thinking nobody would notice, there would be no meetings after that. They nodded, too fast. Nods mean nothing without memory, so I gave them one. I slid a file across the table. Not thick, just enough. Names, dates, payments that shouldn't exist, connections that couldn't survive daylight. I told them to keep it, consider it a reminder. Then I stood. As I reached the door, one of them spoke, voice shaking. Asked what happens if someone forgets. I stopped, looked back. Then we remind them, I said, louder. I walked out into the street and felt Harlem breathe again. Slowly, carefully, but not peacefully, because agreements made in fear don't last. And somewhere behind me I knew someone was already thinking about how to break it. The agreement lasted exactly 9 days. That's how long it took for someone to convince themselves I was bluffing. It started small, always does. A face I didn't recognize near a schoolyard, not close enough to panic anyone, just close enough to test reaction time. A question asked in the wrong tone. A runner offered extra money to forget what he saw. I heard about all of it before sundown. That's the part outsiders never understand. Harlem doesn't warn me because they're scared of me. They warn me because they know I listen. I didn't move right away. I let the city show me who was sloppy enough to break the deal and arrogant enough to think it wouldn't circle back. By midnight, the shape of it was clear. This wasn't the whole outfit. Just one man trying to impress people who weren't there to save him, a freelancer, the most dangerous kind of stupid. I sent word for him to come see me. No threats, no chase, an invitation. He showed up smiling, thinking he was about to negotiate from strength. He sat down, that's as far as he got. I told him about the agreement he'd violated. He laughed, said nobody told him Harlem was off limits, said business changes. I leaned in just enough for him to hear me clearly. Business doesn't change, I said. People forget. His smile faded. Too late, I stood, buttoned my jacket, walked past him without touching him. Behind me, Johnny closed the door. I didn't wait to hear what followed. Some lessons don't need supervision, they need permanence. By morning, the message was everywhere. Quiet, firm, final, no more tests, no more visitors, no more misunderstandings. Harlem settled back into its rhythm. Children laughing, windows open, life continuing like it trusted the ground under its feet again. I stood by the window one last time and watched the street wake up. Power isn't loud, justice isn't clean, and protection always has a cost. The difference is who pays it. And tonight, it was Harlem. Peace is loud when it first comes back. Doors stay open longer. Music drifts later into the night. People laugh a little harder, like they're daring the darkness to try again. Harlem did all of that and more. That's when I knew it wouldn't last, because peace attracts attention. 2 weeks after the freelancer vanished, I got word from a place I don't usually hear from unless something's wrong. A federal ear had twitched. Not enough to act, just enough to listen. Someone downtown had decided if they couldn't move me, they'd study me. That's a different kind of danger. Street enemies announce themselves. Bad suits pretend they're invisible. I adjusted. Fewer meetings, shorter routes. Let my name cool while my influence stayed warm. That balance matters. The moment people think you enjoy power, they start planning how to take it. Late one night, Johnny brought me a name. Not from Harlem. Not from downtown. Somewhere in between. A man who specialized in connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. Accountants, politicians, ghost companies. He wasn't a predator, he was worse. He was curious. I told Johnny to find out who sent him quietly. No pressure, curiosity always leaves fingerprints. By morning, I had my answer. Nobody sent him. He was hunting on his own. That meant there was no negotiation coming. No warning shot to fire. Men like that don't scare easy, and they don't stop once they smell a pattern. They think they're smarter than consequences. I stood by the window again, watching a delivery truck idle too long at the corner. Different driver. New plates. Old instincts told me to memorize it anyway. Harlem was calm. Too calm. Somewhere nearby, someone was learning my habits instead of my rules. And that's when the game changes. Because the next threat wasn't coming from greed. It was coming from curiosity. And curiosity doesn't care who it hurts to get answers. Curiosity walks softer than greed. It doesn't kick doors, it waits for patterns. I felt it before I saw it. Little delays that didn't belong. A car that showed up twice on different blocks, same dent, different driver. Questions being asked that sounded harmless until you stacked them together. Someone was building a map. Not of Harlem, of me. That kind of attention doesn't come from the street. The street knows better. This was someone who believed paper outlasts fear. Someone who thought if you trace enough lines, power reveals itself. They were half right. I changed my routine again, not drastically, just enough to see who stumbled. When you bend a pattern, the people depending on it trip. 2 days later, Johnny confirmed it. The curious man had been seen near a records office he didn't belong in, asking about businesses that paid taxes too clean to be real. Laundromats, shipping fronts, quiet places with loud balance sheets. He wasn't chasing crime. He was chasing structure. I told Johnny to let him keep looking. That raised an eyebrow. Why? He asked. Because men like that, I said, walk themselves into the truth if you don't rush them. That night I sat alone and thought about the girl, about the mother, about how one line drawn too softly invites erasers instead of respect. I thought about how power isn't just about stopping wolves, it's about keeping hunters from deciding they own the forest. Somewhere across town, a man was writing my name down for the first time. Not out of fear, out of interest. That's worse, because fear hesitates. Curiosity knocks twice. And the second knock is never polite. He finally stepped out of the shadows. Didn't knock, didn't threaten. Just let me know he'd been close enough to smell the ink on my paperwork. A message reached me through a lawyer who didn't represent him but wanted credit for the introduction. The curious man wanted a conversation, said it would be professional, said he had questions that could turn into problems if left unanswered. That's how men like him talk when they think information is armor. I agreed to meet him, different place, different rules, public enough to feel safe, private enough to talk honestly. He arrived early, notebook tucked away, eyes already cataloging exits. He spoke carefully, asked about businesses, about connections, about how order maintained itself in a place outsiders struggled to control. Never accused, never confirmed, just nudged. I let him talk. Then I told him a story, not about me, about another man like him, smart, patient, curious. A man who thought patterns were leverage. I told him how that man ended up respected by nobody and protected by nothing. The curious man smiled less after that. I leaned in just enough. You're not wrong for asking questions, I said. You're wrong for thinking answers belong to you. He closed his notebook. Said he didn't want trouble, said he only wanted clarity. That's good, I told him, because trouble doesn't want you either. We stood, shook hands. His grip was firm, but his pulse was. As he walked away, I knew he'd understood the surface of the warning, but not the depth. Men like him never do, and depth is where things drown. Part 16. He left Harlem 3 days later, not running, relocating, a new job, a new city, a new focus. His curiosity redirected by forces he never saw, loans that dried up, contacts that stopped returning calls, files that quietly went missing before they could be shared. No violence, no noise, just doors closing one by one. That's the cleanest ending there is. Harlem stayed steady. Kids stayed outside. Mothers slept. The street remembered why certain lines don't move no matter how often they're tested. I went back to my routine. Same coffee, same window, same quiet responsibility. Power doesn't need reminders when it's understood. Some people will always see me as a criminal. Some will call me worse. That's fine. Because while they debate labels, the city keeps breathing. And breathing is the only verdict that matters. Somebody always asks who protects Harlem when the rules fail. The answer isn't loud. It doesn't chase attention. It just makes sure the wolves learn. This neighborhood remembers.